So today, both the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and the Polish Foreign Minister Sikorski have stated unequivocally that the September 10th violation of Polish airspace by Russian drones was not a mistake. It was a deliberate act. That directly contradicts a statement by the US President Donald Trump, not Donald Tusk. Similar names, but very different positions. Donald Trump said, oh, it might have been an accident. What does all this mean 2 days later for NATO-US relations and the possibility of an open conflict between NATO and Russia? Привіт, I'm actually in Odessa in Ukraine right now. And 2 nights ago, we had another large drone attack on Ukraine by Russia. There was between 300 and 400 different ordnance that were fired at the country. It's not the biggest attack we've had. However, around 20 drones entered Polish airspace, either via Ukraine or via neighboring Belarus, which is under Lukashenko allied with Russia. And as a response, NATO scrambled not just Polish aircraft, but also several of their allies' aircraft, notably the Netherlands and Italy. And they shot down 4 of the drones that entered their airspace. It appears from the drones that were not shot down, they did not crash and blow anything up, and they were decoy drones. So either all of the drones were decoys or the 4 that they shot down were not. That seems unclear at this juncture. However, that is a further indication that this was a deliberate act by Russia. It was not that there was an errant drone or 2 that got scrambled or they malfunctioned. If you see so many drones, very surprisingly and an unprecedented act enter Polish airspace, the fact that they were probably, it seems, almost certainly decoy drones also indicates that it is more likely to have been deliberate rather than accidental, because Russia sends a mix of decoys because they are obviously a lot cheaper to produce than the real drone, and then that uses up a lot of Ukrainian air defense because they can't tell if it's a decoy or not, so they got to make a decision to shoot it down and then use up their focus in terms of when you have a lot of drones come in, so they might miss a real drone. In this case, because it was a decoy drone, that means that the probability of it blowing up something significant in Poland and then potentially triggering Article 5 is greatly reduced because it's a decoy. So the main danger is from debris when they shoot it down. This actually led to a Polish residential building being damaged, but no one was injured and no one was killed, fortunately. Poland, in response, activated Article 4, not Article 5 of NATO, which basically allows for higher level consultations to take place immediately. Notably, there were no US aircraft involved in the response to this drone incursion. As part of the NATO treaty, in reality, the US has been guaranteeing European security of its allies since the Cold War and the foundation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. However, with a series of statements by Donald Trump, the US presence, when he was on the campaign trail and since he became president once again, it is questionable whether the US would actually intervene to protect its allies in Europe should they be openly attacked by Russia. This has been another indication. The fact the US didn't take part in shooting down these drones, in spite of the fact that there are 10,000 Polish troops, 10,000 American troops on Polish soil. And since then, Donald Trump said, well, it might be an accident. Basically, he's been making excuses for Russia plausibly, when that was then contradicted very openly by both the Polish foreign minister and the Polish prime minister. What happens next? War games or maneuvers have started we're just about to start in Belarus between Belarusian troops and Russian troops. In the past, Russia has used such maneuvers in order to build up its forces for an invasion of Ukraine that took place in 2022. So there is the potential that Russia will launch a higher level provocation. They see that firing decoy drones, or at least a series of drones, mainly decoys, it appears, into Polish territory. Polish and Air Force and its European allies used a lot of expensive ordnance in order to shoot down just 4 of them, so they got a very low strike rate, just over 25%, around 30% of them they shot down. Ukraine would call it a bad day if they didn't get at least 60-70% of them. They were trying to aim for about 90% shoot down rates. And it's very expensive, so they were spending multiples in terms of the cost of them shooting down versus what Russia is spending in firing those drones over. That is not a very good long-term strategy. Russians were able to glean a lot of intel about NATO's speed of response, the type of response, what they're going to do, how prepared they are in Poland for, say, a larger attack. They could now escalate further. They know that the US so far has not reached the threshold where they're going to respond with anything. There haven't even been these new sanctions that Donald Trump has been talking about for, at this point, months. And instead he just invited Vladimir Putin, rolled out the red carpet for him in Alaska, which is almost a month ago, I think, at this point. So the probability that Russia is now going to escalate with a further provocation, inverted commas, I actually noticed that Donald Tusk in English in one of his tweets referred to it as an attack now. He wasn't saying that 2 days ago, and that's why it was just an Article 4 and not an Article 5 response that they invoked, presumably. But we don't know yet if something that is deemed an attack, and maybe we're about to find that out. It might be in Poland, it might be one of the other neighboring countries like Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. They will definitely be on edge with these maneuvers taking place, so we may see another large drone violation, maybe more drones. Maybe next time there will be some that will have explosives on them and blow up, and see what does that actually entail. Are the European allies of Poland, or maybe another country in the region that has its airspace and maybe is actually attacked in the sense that some target is blown up on their soil, how are they going to respond? Are the other allies going to send troops? Are they going to have some sort of commensurate response in terms of attacking Russia? All these are very unlikely to happen. And what will the US do? Will the US just, well, they deny that it's actually an attack, or at least the president will. Or will they respond with actually some consequences for Russia that would communicate that it is a threshold past which they should not be crossing? So very tense and interesting times that we now see. The US is distracted domestically with the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk. Just before I record this video, there are reports that a suspect has been apprehended. We'll see if that is really the perpetrator of that horrific crime, and whether the focus in a few days will switch back to dealing with an unprecedented violation of NATO's territory by Russia with this drone invasion, whether you call it provocation or attack. Seems that the Poles have been using 2 different words, and what the future provocations are likely to be. Maybe it will be something, as I said, like a larger drone attack, a similar drone attack, maybe not with decoys next time. Maybe we'll be blowing up just an isolated building on, a few meters across the border somewhere in one of the NATO states. Maybe it will be even something much larger under the cover of these maneuvers. I think that's unlikely to happen, that Russia would try to seize some territory with some soldiers with insignia or without insignia while their troops are tied up here in Ukraine. However, if suddenly Russia manages to push Ukraine into some sort of bad temporary ceasefire, right, some sort of deal where it allows Russia to redeploy its troops out of Ukraine, presumably towards the Baltics, where they have been constructing new infrastructure where they could host a large number of troops, then we could very quickly see a new provocation there. And that, of course, would be also unprecedented at that point. So I'll leave it there. That's just an update on what has happened, especially today, since that drone provocation by Russia 2 nights ago. Drop your comments down below about what you think the next steps will be and what you think has happened in reality, and other thoughts and questions you might have. I do have a background in international relations. If you're new to the channel, my name is Connor Klein, and this is my geopolitics channel. I also have a lifestyle channel where I basically help men with living their dream lifestyle in this region, which of course has been afflicted by the Russo-Ukrainian war, heavily affected clearly, and that may be spreading what we call a horizontal escalation. So it may actually escalate in terms of the territory that is being affected by Russia's imperial aggression. So I will see you in another video, probably tomorrow, getting back to making daily videos here for this geopolitics channel, and I will see you in the next one. Do побачення from Odessa,